One of the most important aspects of any off-road adventure is making sure that you don't get lost. So if you're an avid off-roader or you'd like to get out there and start exploring new trails, pay attention to this episode because today I'm talking all about off-road navigation. Don't go anywhere. Hey guys, Matt McAdam here, aka Desert Chief, coming at you live with another exciting episode of Chasing Dust. I'm out here at a local trail system, and today I want to talk to you guys all about off-road navigation. I just got back from a whole month of off-roading, basically 3 different areas. I went up to the Eastern Sierras, the Mojave Desert, and Baja to go watch the San Felipe 250 race. So I'm pretty tired of travel, and I'm kind of stoked to be around my local trails here at home. And right now I'm actually at the local trailhead for a trail system up here in the Santa Ana Mountains. Some of you guys may know the area, but this is actually where I first got my feet wet and I first started exploring off-road trails about a decade ago. I kind of was late to the game. I didn't have, a family that went off-roading like a lot of you guys did. I kind of had to fall into that hobby on my own. And one of the things that I learned was how to find new trails and how to make sure that I can go out there and explore them with the confidence of being able to get back on the grid. So I thought that would be a great topic for today's episode of Chasing Dust, is to talk about how to find new trails, how I actually prepare for them, and the tools that I use when I'm out there on the trail itself to make sure that I don't get lost and I can find my way back, and also if I have an emergency or something goes wrong, precautions that I take to make sure that I can work through those solutions and make sure that I can get home okay. Some of the topics I'm going to go over on this episode are the prep that I do at home before I actually leave, the prep that I do when I'm about to hit the dirt, before I actually leave the asphalt here when I'm out here, the different gear and devices that I take with me, how I use those devices and that gear, and then also how to share my information and some of the navigation tips that I've used on these trails with my friends and family who are also into this stuff. Before we get into it, guys, I want to start off by saying I'm going to be talking a lot about onX Off-Road. If you guys are familiar with that app, it's a navigation app for your iPhone or Android that's developed for off-roaders, and it's actually catered towards off-roaders. onX Off-Road has not given me anything for this video. I actually paid for a full subscription for the year, and I've just found it to be the most useful off-road navigation app that's out there. And that's why you're gonna hear me mentioning it a lot on this video, is because I actually use it every time I go out there. All right, so with that said, the first thing that I wanna talk about is the prep that I do at home before I actually load up the vehicle, before I make plans with anybody. Basically, how do I start looking for a new place to go off-roading, or somewhere that maybe I want to explore that I've seen other people go to before. That's really the gist of this first segment of this video. I tend to find a lot of the new off-road areas that I like to explore just from different things in life, like friends who have been out there, maybe an Instagram post from somebody who was out there and it looked really cool and I wanted to explore it. There's a lot of ways that I can find trails. Sometimes even as simple as just perusing a map and finding a spot that looks kind of cool that I want to check out, and then seeing if there's a viable 4x4 trail, in the area that I could drive on. How you find the trail really isn't important. It's how you approach the prep that goes into actually getting out there, which is the important part. Now, some of the initial research that I do when I'm looking at a new place that I want to go explore is really some of the basics, like where are the nearby gas stations? How long is the trail itself? What's the trail difficulty, the climate, some of the weather conditions for the time of year that I plan on going out there. I look at some of those basic pieces of information and basically just take notes of all this stuff, so that way I can set myself up for the future, make sure that I can actually have a successful day out there. If it's going to be a weekend trip, I'll look for a viable camping spot, maybe somewhere that people have gone camping before out there, or a place that's designated for camping. If it's like BLM, you can camp pretty much anywhere. If you saw that episode, I show you how you can camp anywhere on BLM land. So I do that as often as I can, but sometimes there's areas where you can't just camp anywhere. You have to camp in a designated dry camp spot or a campground. So once I've got the basic information down, the next thing I'll do is I'll start to build a route. And the onX app doesn't really have a way of building a route on the actual mobile app, but their desktop app has a really powerful mapping tool that lets you build your own route wherever you may be going. And you can add your own waypoints and camp spots, and you can mark gas stations, you can mark where the highway ends or where the pavement ends. Really nicely able to do all this stuff before you even leave your home. And that will translate to the app itself, so that when you're out here, you can actually use it in a mobile device and you'll know exactly where you're going, and you can reference that map that you created before. I really like to know what way I'm going to be going to wherever I'm going, or what routes I want to explore, what trails I want to take on, before I ever even leave my house. But let's be clear about something. You're not going to have cell phone reception in most places that you're going to go visiting, especially if they're pretty off the grid like the ones out here in the western United States. I find that most of the places I go off-roading don't have any kind of cell phone reception, and certainly no Wi-Fi. Now that's really one of my favorite parts about the onX Off-Road app, is right built into it, they have a feature where you can download offline maps before you lose cell phone signal while you're at home, preferably with Wi-Fi. You can actually download square mile maps of areas that you want to go explore. So last weekend before I hit Death Valley, I was able to actually download the entire park's map area in a pretty good resolution, so that when I got out there, you know, obviously there's zero cell phone reception anywhere in Death Valley. I was able to use the app and actually have a good resolution map to look off of, and that's what I was using to make sure that I was still on the right track. Then the last thing that I'll do before I leave my house is that I'll take that data, basically all that stuff, and I'll compile it into an email, or, you know, send a map file or something. But I want to get all this stuff into one area so that I can send that to my loved ones or my friends or whoever is going to be looking out for me and that's not going to be going on this trip with me. Just in case something goes wrong, somebody else knows what your itinerary is. I mean, it's always important for people to know where you're going, but sometimes if they don't have an exact idea of what trails you're running, or what your plan is for what day, or, you know, kind of what you're going to be doing at any given moment, it can be problematic if something were to go wrong and you need someone to help you out. Because if they don't hear back from you after a certain number of days, at least that way they know where they're looking for you. You know, simply just saying, oh, I'm going to Death Valley for the weekend, you know, doesn't really narrow things down for people. If you were to have a breakdown over there and people don't hear back from you for a couple of days, you know, it's difficult to find somebody out there who has had an issue. I think people really underestimate the value of telling somebody exactly what your plan is ahead of time. There was a couple in Death Valley just a couple of weeks ago who had taken their Subaru or some kind of SUV down a trail, and they actually had 2 flat tires, and they had decided to leave their vehicle to go search for help, and they left a sign on their car, but nobody really knew where they were going or where they were at. And unfortunately, one of them passed away, probably just from heat exhaustion or from dehydration. But that could have been avoided by, you know, letting somebody know exactly where you're going, who you're with, what supplies you've got, what you plan on doing on each day, and then basically your whole itinerary. Because if you go missing, they know where to start looking for you. So it's an unfortunate reality, but, you know, it is one of those things that off-roaders need to keep in mind. You know, things happen, so you want to make sure that you're as prepared as you can be. All right, so let's say you got all that out of the way. Now it's time to actually load up the vehicle and head out to the area in which you want to check out. So let's say you got about a, you know, 8-hour drive from your home, but you're going to make it up there and you're going to start hitting the trails the next day. What I tend to do before I actually go and hit the dirt is some local prep wherever I'm heading up to. So before I even hit the dirt, some of the things I do, especially if I'm exploring a new area, is I take note of a few things. Where are the local, you know, tow services or automotive repair services? Are they nearby? You know, get their phone number, maybe get their address at the very minimum. I also like to find where the local gas stations are at, so I know where they're at, how far away they are from the trailhead, so that way I can kind of guesstimate how much gas I need to bring with me, or if I need to bring any extra. Another thing that I'll do is also look for local law enforcement or ranger stations. And in many national parks, Death Valley included, you can actually give the ranger station your itinerary, so that way if you don't turn up or if you don't check in by a certain date and somebody reports you as missing, they know exactly where to start looking for you, and you have a much better chance of getting out of there without any issue. And while you're there at the ranger station, or if you're anywhere near like a headquarters to a park or something like that, or an area, gas station maybe even sometimes have them, grab yourself a physical map. I cannot stress to you enough how much value you can have from just having a physical map. I mean, I tend to rely on technology quite often, but it's so easy for it to just go wrong. I've been on trails up in the Sierras where I was taking a photo or a video as I was hiking and I dropped my phone into a freaking river. What are you gonna do then? You don't have the app, you don't have your Google Maps, you don't have a way of calling anybody, you're screwed. But with a physical map, you know, chances are if you have it stashed away in your backpack somewhere or in the back of the truck or something, if something were to happen to your, you know, mobile device or whatever it is you're using that, you know, is electronic, you can rely on the physical analog map to at least give you a better idea of where you're at. So that's some of the basics that I do before I hit the dirt when I'm up in the area and I'm able to actually have access to people and certain stuff. All right, so you did all your prep work, you did all your homework, you know exactly where you want to go, you got your local maps, you got all the information to people at home so they know where you're at. You are 100% dialed and ready to hit the dirt and go have a great weekend wherever it is you want to go. What gear do you take with you to make sure that you can get out there, you don't get lost, and that you can come back and find your way back to civilization without any drama? So at the top of my list is my navigation software, and that could be anything you want. I personally like the onX off-road app. I think it's the best one out there. I've used Gaia, I've used LeadNav, I've also used a physical GPS system like a Garmin. I've used another GPS system for off-roaders like the Lowrance Baja 5M that I have in my Toyota. Now, quite obviously, that's an app on my iPhone, so it's going to require charging from time to time. Obviously, you can rely on the, you know, charger outlets that are inside your vehicle. I've got a couple USB outlets in this thing. But let's say your truck dies. Let's say your battery's dead, or you run out of gas and you can't, you know, you don't want to leave yourself stuck without some sort of a backup way of charging this chief device that is navigating you. So I do bring with me one more piece of tech that I do bring just in case something happens, and it actually is very useful. I'm gonna grab it for you right now out of the truck to show it to you. Okay, so right here underneath my back seat, I've got a Type S battery jumper. This is one of those small battery jumpers. It's got jumper cables on it. It's a battery bank. It holds you know, voltage inside of it to jump your battery in case it dies. Not only is this important if you actually have a dead battery somewhere out there, and this will save you, but it's also doubles as a battery bank, and it's got a USB outlet on it so you can charge your phone off of it. And I use it for camping because when I'm in a tent, I don't really have anything to plug my phone into overnight. So I'll use this and I'll just plug my phone into this, and by the next morning I got a full charge on it. So I just got to make sure this is charged before I leave the house. Maybe another item to add to your prep list before you leave. But this is something that I bring along with any of my devices like my iPhone that has the onX off-road app on it. Next item on my list is a compass. This sounds kind of silly because most vehicles, at least modern vehicles, have a compass built right into them. But never underestimate the power of Mother Nature and what she might do to your vehicle. You never know when things are just going to go haywire and you can't actually rely on the compass that's built into your truck. If you don't have an innate sense of direction, luckily I do. I was a geography major in college, so I have a pretty good sense of direction. But if you don't, like most people out there, just, you know, if you're out there on a cloudy day even, I probably couldn't tell you what direction is what. Or at night, having a compass is really ideal because you can actually make sure that you're headed in the right direction towards civilization if you ever have a problem. You come to a fork in the road, one goes east, the other goes west. You know that town is west. Probably take the west one, you know what I mean? Now, if you did your homework, you know that the next piece of gear that I take with me to make sure I don't get lost out there is really important. That's a physical map. And you can combine that with a compass to really dial in wherever you're at. Most physical maps actually have marked trails in the area on them, and you can almost pinpoint exactly where on that trail you are. You know, we're all used to having the blue dot on the screen to know where you're at on a map, but with a physical map, there's no blue dot. So you got to kind of figure out exactly where you are on the actual trail to figure out how far you got to go to get out of there, or how far you got to go to get to wherever you want to go. And that's very easily doable with a compass, knowing exactly what direction you're headed right now and what part of the trail. I've used it before with a physical map, and it works very well if you just know how to use it. So bring a physical map, bring the compass, and then of course, bring something to charge your chief navigation device, whatever that may be. If it's an electronic device, have a backup way of being able to charge that or keep the battery at least topped off. All right, so now that we went over the gear that I take with me when I go out to these adventures, the next portion is how I use that gear to ensure that I have a successful trip. Now, I can guarantee you that there are dozens of other YouTube videos out there that compare and contrast and review different off-road navigation techniques, whether that's a dedicated app or it's an actual device like a GPS, like a Garmin or something, I'm not going to get into any of that. I'm not here to compare them or tell you which one's better. I'm just here to tell you the one that I use for myself when I go out there, and how I use it to actually have a great time when I'm out there, make sure that I don't get lost or my friends don't get lost. So I'm just going to talk about the onX off-road app in this portion here. But a lot of this stuff applies to other GPS devices or other tracking softwares or any kind of app that you might use for off-road navigation. So pay attention to it, even if you don't have onX off-road. So when I'm in the onX off-road app and I'm actually out there exploring a new area, let's say there's some things out there that I want to check out that I don't have time to get to that day, but I want to come back at some point, and I don't want to have to just rely on my memory and how to get there. I use their waypoints, I use their lines, all the tools that are within the app to actually mark spots like potential camping spots, or a river crossing, or a trail that goes up to the top of a peak that you didn't get to explore that one time. There's a lot of different tools within the onX off-road app that you can use on your offline maps, so that way when you come back up there, or if you want to show somebody else how to get to a spot, it's easy for them to be able to use that and reference it to where they are now and how to get there. Now, of course, waypoints and lines and all this stuff, these features that onX Off-Road has, it's not something that's, specific to this app. These are all functions of any good GPS software, any good GPS device. You can set waypoints, you can set distances between 2 points, draw lines, all that stuff. You can do that within Google Maps too. But just knowing how to use that and why it's useful to be able to do all that stuff while you're out there is half the battle. Because if you know how to use all that and you actually do use it to mark stuff, then next time when you're out there, you can be like, oh yeah, there's this really good campsite right over here by a river that nobody ever goes to that I drove by last time. Why don't we stay there this time and check that out? So that's a real world example of how I've used waypoints in the past to make sure that, I can get to the places that I wanted to visit the last time I was out there. If you're like me and you like to share your experiences or share your routes with other people who are into this stuff, maybe you just can't go with them, but they want to go up and on the weekend, setting waypoints for camp, or, where some of the spots like, oh, this is where the gas station is, or this is where, whatever, the nearest repair facility. Setting all those waypoints and drawing those tracks is a really easy way to get people the confidence of going out there without having ever been there before. Even if you're not there with them, it's kind of like you are, because you gave them all the information that you gathered and collected while you were out there. All that brings me to our next topic, which is what a tracker is and how I use it. So a tracker, or tracking software or tracking function of a GPS, is basically like the equivalent of Hansel and Gretel leaving breadcrumbs behind them as they're walking and getting lost through this forest. It just lets you draw a track for everywhere you've actually driven on a map via the GPS satellite. So it doesn't care if you have service or whatever, it just drops it and it says you're on these coordinates, this is where you're walking, this is where you're going, you made a turn here, you stopped here, you did a loop there. So anywhere you go, it will leave a line basically of where you've been. I turn it on before I actually hit the dirt, and that way I have a track of, my route through the Mojave Road, or my route through Big Bend National Park. And that way I can reference that line that I took and be like, oh yeah, I remember we kind of went to that campsite and it wasn't that great, so I don't want to take that same route, I just know where it's at and I'll just keep going straight. Or if you want to show your friends a route that you took that was really scenic, it was amazing, like, this is like a really awesome trail that you guys should check out, here is my track from that weekend that I was up there last month. Use this on your app, and then you can go wherever you want to go. Another way that the tracking function is really useful is that it actually gives you a total distance of how far you traveled. So if you've got, you're trying to calculate mileage or what your, fuel consumption is, that will give you an accurate idea of how many miles you've actually driven. As you guys may have seen from my re-gearing episode from last month, if you put bigger tires, like I have on this Ranger over here, all of your software on the truck is completely inaccurate. So if it says you've gone 40 miles, you've probably gone about 60 miles if you put a 35-inch tire on a truck that thinks it's still on a stock tire. Then of course, when you're finished tracking, you just turn off tracking and that's it. It saves your line. You can name it whatever you want. You can say it was, weekend in the Mojave, or weekend up in the Sierras, or whatever it is. and it will stop tracking your location. So then you can actually go ahead and share that stuff, which brings me to my next point. I got to admit to you guys, for the first like 5 or 6 years of my off-road career, I was like, I don't need any navigation apps. I know where I need to be. I know where I'm going. I know which way I'm headed. I don't have any problems with this stuff. Like, you know, I was a geography major, blah, 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 you know, just talking up my own big head. And I didn't have any way of navigating when I was off-road. And a few of the things that started to bug me was eventually I was exploring so many cool new places that I just couldn't remember, you know, which way to go at a fork when I was at a trail that I'd been to one time before. And that's really why I think that this is one of the most important facets of off-road adventure is, you know, navigation, and making all these waypoints and having all this information before you head out there is because you're not going to remember this stuff all the time. So let's say you want to reference this for the next time you go out there, you'll have all that ready to go. If you ask any of my close friends, or if you follow me on Instagram at Desert Chief, you'll know that one of my favorite things about off-roading and exploring new areas and just going out there and going on these adventures is coming home and sharing that with people who I know would love it. People who dig this stuff, people who are into off-roading. Maybe they're just going to come with me that weekend or whatever it may be. I really love being able to share this with them. And there's no better way of doing it than to just get them out there and have them do it for themselves. The problem with that is that we can't always take these people with us. We're not always available at the same schedules as them. So when I create all of these maps and all these tools and compile all this information before I head out, what it allows me to do is to just pass that information on to my friends or family, like my dad, you know, who wants to go out and explore more trails. I'm not going to always be able to go with him, but I love to, you know, give him all this stuff so that he has all of the ammo and all the tools necessary to get out there. And I know, and I feel confident that he's going to be able to come back home at the end of the weekend. So that's really important. You're like the leader of your little like pack of friends. Is like, you have all the info. You're the guy to go to. On the radio, when someone who's in front who doesn't know where they're going comes to a fork in the road, they're going to get on there and say, hey, Matt, there's a fork up here. Which way do I go? And then you just pop your phone out and you go, well, I've already downloaded all the maps here. And I know that our campsite is going to be northwest of where we're at, which means that we have to take this track to get there. And that just makes you look really cool because you just know where you're going. It's really confidence inspiring because you just feel like you can get out there and come back and you don't have to worry about a thing. And that's really one of the things that I love about off-road navigation is that it just gives me the confidence to not have to worry about any of the bad stuff. It just lets me enjoy my weekend and get out there for why I want to get out there, just to have fun and see cool stuff. With that said, I want to thank Nitto and Driving Line because they're the ones who usually send me out to these amazing places to go do these videos. And honestly, without these awesome companies behind my back, I wouldn't have seen half of the cool stuff that I've seen in my life. So really got to say kudos to those guys. And thank you guys, the viewers. I appreciate you guys watching. Of course, you guys are really why I do this, because without you, I'm just talking to an empty camera. So I appreciate you guys always being there and commenting. And if you guys like this video, if you have any tips that I didn't go over, you know, I'm still learning. I'm only 10 years into this hobby, but I'm still learning. Drop it in the comments below and leave it for other people who might be watching this. But I'm here in Silverado Canyon, which was the genesis of my off-roading career, where it all started way back when I was a kid, first time driving off-road. I'm gonna head up the mountain that I've been up 100 times and just have a great day out here because it's beautiful weather. I appreciate you guys watching. This has been your pal, Matt McAdam, aka Desert Chief, only on Driving Lines Chasing Dust. See you on the next one.